The coastline had a way of stripping everything down to what mattered. Not through cruelty exactly, though the wind off the Pacific could cut like a blade, but through something more ancient, more truthful. Here, where jagged cliffs met churning gray water and salt spray painted everything white, I was just another creature clinging to existence. My hands were raw again. I didn't look at them anymore. Looking made the pain sharper than the dull ache I'd grown accustomed to. The piece of driftwood in my grip was twisted, bleached white by sun and sea, split along one side where the ocean had battered it against rocks. But it was all I had. I wedged it between two others already planted in the sand, trying to create something that might pass for shelter. The whole thing tilted toward the water like it wanted to return to the waves, and I knew it wouldn't survive the first king tide. But I kept building. The air tasted of coming rain, that sharp ozone warning that meant I had maybe 36 hours before the storm made landfall. 36 hours to transform this collection of ocean-cast refuse into something that could keep me alive. My breath crystallized in the December cold, and I pulled my salt-stiffened jacket tighter, feeling every tear where the fabric had surrendered to the elements. I used to have a home. Used to have a place inland where I belonged, or at least where I was permitted to exist. Welcome to Floxy's Shifter Romance Tales. Please subscribe to my channel, like and tell me where you are watching from in the comment section. I appreciate you. The Tidecaller clan had taken me in when I was 15, after my parents drowned during a fishing accident off the Oregon coast. I remembered the matriarch then, a woman named Serena, looking at me with something that might have been pity. "She's human," someone had whispered. Completely human. No connection to the water at all. As if I couldn't hear them. As if I wasn't standing right there with salt water still drying on the borrowed clothes they'd given me. They let me stay, assigned me the smallest room in the compound, the one that flooded during storm surges. Let me eat after the clan had finished. I learned to be grateful for whatever was left, learned to make myself valuable in ways that didn't require transformation or ocean magic or any of the gifts I'd never possessed. I cleaned, I cooked, I mended nets and pretended not to notice when they discussed me like I was driftwood myself, useful but ultimately disposable. It had been bearable until Dominic claimed leadership. I shoved the memory down, forcing my bleeding fingers to tie another length of kelp rope around the junction of two pieces of wood. The rope kept snapping, brittle from too much sun. Dominic wanted a clan of pure bloodlines, of warriors who could shift between human and seal form, who could breathe underwater and communicate with the currents. He'd made that clear in his first gathering, his eyes sliding over me like I was a stain on the legacy he'd inherited. Within 8 months, he'd found reasons to exile everyone who didn't fit his vision. The elderly who could no longer transform, the injured who'd lost their connection to the sea, the human girl who would never shift, never hunt beneath the waves, never be anything but a burden. He'd given me 2 days to leave. Called it mercy. That was 3 weeks ago. I'd made it this far on foot, heading south along the coast because north led to clan territories that might send word back to Tidecaller. South was wilderness, was freedom, was probably death, but it was my death to choose. The driftwood I was struggling with suddenly cracked, the rotted core giving way with a sound like snapping bone. I stumbled backward, catching myself against a boulder, feeling the barnacles scrape through my jacket. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at my pathetic attempt at shelter. It looked like debris from a shipwreck, a child's sandcastle that wouldn't even deflect the wind, let alone the rain. Something hot and sharp pressed behind my eyes, but I hadn't cried since the day Dominic issued his ultimatum, and I wasn't going to start now. Tears were a luxury for people who had someone to witness them, to care. Out here, crying just wasted water your body needed. I bent to retrieve another piece of driftwood. That's when I felt it. That primal awareness that something was watching from the water. The hair on my arms rose, and my heart, that traitorous organ, began hammering against my ribs. I straightened slowly, scanning the surf line. The beach had gone silent. No seabirds, no scuttle of crabs in the tide pools. Just the waves and my own ragged breathing. Then I saw them. Seals, massive ones, their sleek bodies rising from the foam like they'd materialized from the ocean itself. There were at least 15, maybe 20 more in the deeper water beyond the breakers. Their eyes caught the fading afternoon light, reflecting gold and copper and something almost like starlight. I'd seen clan members in seal form before, had lived among them in their human shapes. But I'd never been on this side of an encounter. Never been the outsider, the intruder on their beach. My legs locked, some ancient part of my brain screaming contradictory commands. Run toward land, wade into the water, climb the cliff, freeze, surrender. The largest seal hauled itself onto the sand. It was enormous, easily 7 feet long, with a coat that shifted between silver and deep blue-gray depending on how the light hit it. Its eyes weren't the warm brown of harbor seals, but an unsettling ice blue that seemed to pierce straight through me. Even in animal form, authority rolled off it in waves. A leader. I knew it the way you know when a riptide has caught you, a pull in your chest, a change in the water around you. This was it then. After everything, after surviving my parents' deaths, after enduring years of being less than, after walking away from the only home I'd known, this was how it ended. Alone on a beach, torn apart by selkies who probably wouldn't even bother learning my name. The blue-gray seal moved closer, and I forced myself to meet its eyes. If I was going to die, I'd face it. My mother used to say that courage wasn't the absence of fear but being terrified and doing the thing anyway. She'd meant it about small things like learning to swim in rough surf or climbing the rigging on my father's boat. I doubted she'd imagined I'd apply it to staring down a creature that could drag me under and hold me there until my lungs gave out. But the attack didn't come. Instead, the blue-gray seal stopped about 15 feet away, its head tilting as it studied me. Then it did something I didn't expect. It looked past me at my pitiful shelter, at the pile of broken driftwood and desperate hope. Its whiskers twitched forward, and if a seal could look contemplative, it did. The other seals remained motionless, waiting. Clan dynamics, I realized. They were waiting for its decision, its command. My fate was entirely in the flippers of this massive creature that could probably hold its breath longer than I could survive without air. I heard it then, the sound of transformation. It was something you never quite got used to, no matter how many times you'd witnessed it. Bones reshaping, skin rippling like water, the impossible becoming possible. The blue-gray seal's form shimmered, expanded, reshaped itself into something else, into someone else. He stood before me now in human form, and I had to fight not to step back. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of build that came from a lifetime of swimming against ocean currents. His hair was dark and wet, hanging past his shoulders, and those eyes, those ice blue eyes, remained unchanged. He was bare-chested despite the cold, wearing only dark pants that looked far too expensive for the middle of a desolate beach. Tattoos marked his arms and torso, intricate patterns that looked like waves and currents and something ancient that I couldn't quite decipher. He looked at me, then at my shelter, then back at me. A muscle in his jaw tightened. When he spoke, his voice was deeper than I expected, roughened by something I couldn't quite name. "You're building with dead wood." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "It's all I could find that I could carry. It won't hold." He stated it like a fact, like telling me the ocean was salt. I know. What else could I say? I knew it was hopeless. I'd known it with every piece I'd placed, every strip of kelp I'd tried to bind together. But hopeless work was still work, still movement, still better than lying down and letting the tide take me. He watched me for a long moment, and I couldn't read his expression. Then he turned, looking back at the seals waiting in the surf. He made a sound, not quite a word, more like a command in a language older than human speech. The seals melted back into the water, disappearing so quickly and silently that I might have imagined them. All except 4, who transformed as he had, becoming men and women who moved forward with the casual confidence of people who'd never had to question their place in the world. They were younger than the leader, I thought, though still built like they'd been carved from the same stone as the cliffs. One had reddish hair bleached lighter by sun and salt, with a scar across his shoulder. Another was a woman with sharp features and sea-green eyes that assessed me with clinical interest. The third was dark-skinned and quiet, watching everything with an intensity that made me nervous. The fourth was blonde with kind eyes, the only one who smiled at me, though it didn't quite reach her face. The leader, because that's what he had to be, looked at the four, then gestured toward the cliff behind me. Bring timber. Proper timber from the forest above. They left without question, moving with supernatural speed up paths I hadn't known existed. I stood frozen, not understanding what was happening, my mind trying to catch up with a reality that had shifted too quickly. One moment, I'd been preparing to die. The next, a sulky lord who could have killed me without effort was, what? Helping me? Why? The word escaped before I could stop it. He turned those ice-blue eyes back to me, and for the first time I saw something flicker in them. Not pity. I would have hated pity. Something else. Something almost like recognition. Because, he said quietly, I know what it looks like when someone refuses to surrender, even when they should. The four returned with timber that would have taken me days to even locate, let alone transport. They moved with an efficiency that spoke of years working together, dropping logs twice my height onto the sand without making a sound. The green-eyed woman caught me staring and raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The leader had been walking the perimeter of my pathetic attempt at shelter, occasionally crouching to examine the sand, the angle of the cliff face, the way the wind funneled through the cove. He moved like the tide itself, like something that had never known awkwardness or uncertainty. When he returned, he pointed to a spot 30 feet from where I'd been building. There, he said. Higher ground. When the king tides come, the water reaches your foundation. You'd have drowned in your sleep. I looked at where I'd chosen, seeing now the slightly darker sand, the way shells and seaweed had collected in a line just beyond my structure. Of course. I'd been so focused on finding a spot sheltered from the wind that I hadn't thought about the tides. Another mistake that might have killed me, added to the growing list. The red-haired one started laying out timber with the precision of someone who'd built 100 structures. Foundation first, he said, speaking to me for the first time. His voice carried an Irish lilt. You build from the ground up, not from desperation down. It could have been cruel, but something in his tone made it sound almost kind, like he was sharing a truth rather than mocking my ignorance. I'm Finn, he added, driving a sharpened stake into the sand with his bare hands. The earth accepted it like it was returning home. That's Morgan. He nodded toward the green-eyed woman. The quiet one is Tobias, and the sunshine over there is Iris. Iris, the blonde woman, acknowledged her name with a small wave. She was measuring something using what looked like actual tools pulled from a waterproof pack I hadn't noticed her carrying. Where had that come from? I was beginning to realize these weren't just random selkies who'd stumbled upon me. This was organized, intentional. The leader watched his clan work, occasionally giving a direction with nothing more than a glance or a subtle gesture. They understood him without words, moving in sync like parts of a greater current. It was beautiful and painful to watch, this thing I'd never had, this belonging that ran deeper than blood or even species. I stood uselessly to the side, my bleeding fingers curled against my palms, not knowing what to do with myself. I'd spent years making myself useful to a clan that barely tolerated me. But here, I was just in the way. These people moved with a kind of strength that made my attempts at contributing laughable. You're just going to stand there? The leader's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. I looked at him, finding those ice-blue eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. I can't lift what they can lift. No, he agreed, and I braced for the dismissal, the reminder of my uselessness. Instead, he gestured toward a pile of smaller branches and driftwood pieces that Finn had set aside. But you can sort. Straight pieces there, curved there, split ones in that pile. We'll need all of them for different purposes. It was such a small thing, such a simple task that even I couldn't fail at it. But the way he said it, like my contribution actually mattered, made something crack open in my chest. I moved toward the pile before my legs could forget how to work, before the sting behind my eyes could become anything more. I sorted while a world took shape around me. They worked as the sun bled into the ocean, painting everything orange and gold and violet. The foundation went up first, just as Finn had said, solid timber anchored deep enough to resist any tide. Then walls, real ones, fitted together with joints that looked like they'd been crafted by master shipwrights. Morgan climbed like gravity was optional, setting beams that would hold a roof strong enough to withstand Pacific storms. Tobias measured and adjusted, ensuring everything was level, true, perfect. And the leader, he did everything. Lifted what needed lifting, cut what needed cutting, directed when necessary, worked alongside his clan when direction wasn't required. I'd seen leaders before. Dominic had commanded from a distance, treating physical labor like it was beneath him. This man led from the front, his hands as calloused as anyone's, his strength used rather than simply displayed. I realized I didn't even know his name. "What do I call you?" The question slipped out during a lull when Finn and Morgan were debating the angle of a support beam. He looked at me from where he was securing a corner joint. "Most call me my lord." My heart stopped. Lord. This wasn't just a leader of some random selkie pot on the coast. This was the Lord, the one even Serena had spoken about in hushed, reverent tones during clan gatherings, the Ocean Lord of the Pacific Territories, ruler of the largest selkie domain on the western seaboard. I'd been demanding answers from royalty. I must have looked stricken because something almost like amusement flickered across his face. "But you can call me Theron. I'm Elena." My name sounded small compared to his, forgettable. I didn't know, I wouldn't have what? He straightened, brushing sawdust from his hands. Questioned me? Good. Questions show you still have fight left. Finn laughed from somewhere above us, though I wasn't sure what was funny. Morgan shook her head but was smiling too, that sharp-edged expression that suggested she knew something I didn't. Night came faster than I expected, the temperature dropping so quickly I could see my breath misting in the air. My shelter, no, my cabin now, had walls and a complete roof. It was more than I'd dreamed of building in a month, let alone an evening. It was the difference between surviving and simply dying slower. Tobias started a fire without asking, the flames catching impossibly quick on wood that should have needed kindling. Magic, probably clan magic that I'd heard about but never seen used so casually. The warmth drew me like a beacon, my body remembering what it felt like not to be cold straight through to my bones. "Sit," Theron said, and it wasn't quite an order but wasn't quite a suggestion either. I sat on a smooth log Finn had positioned near the fire, the heat feeling like a living thing against my face, almost painful after so long in the cold. I watched the flames dance and tried not to think about what this meant, what I owed, what would be demanded in return. Nothing was free. I'd learned that lesson young and had the scars to prove it. "You're bleeding." Iris appeared beside me with a first aid kit that looked professional grade. She'd put on a jacket at some point, thick fleece that probably cost more than everything I owned. "It's nothing." I tried to curl my fingers inward, hide the evidence of my weakness. "It's not nothing." She didn't reach for my hands, didn't force, just waited, patient as the tide, until I slowly extended them toward the firelight. The cuts weren't deep, but there were many, some old and half-healed, some fresh from today's work. My palms were calloused in strange places, the skin of someone who'd learned labor through desperation rather than training. Iris cleaned them with something that stung, but I didn't flinch. I'd learned long ago that showing pain just made people uncomfortable. "You've been alone for a while," she said quietly, wrapping my right hand with practiced efficiency. 3 weeks. Then, because something about the firelight and the unexpected kindness made me reckless, but I'd been alone longer than that. She glanced up at me, her kind eyes sharp and assessing. "Tide Collar Clan." My whole body went rigid. "How did you, your jacket?" She nodded toward where I'd finally taken it off, the threadbare thing with its patches and repairs, has their mark stitched inside, faded but visible if you know what to look for. Of course. I'd forgotten about that, about the symbol that labeled me even in exile. "I'm not with them anymore." Clearly, she moved to my left hand, gentle despite her obvious strength. "Dominic is a fool." I blinked at her. You didn't speak about clan leaders that way, especially not ones who controlled significant territory. It was dangerous, disrespectful. But Iris said it like she was commenting on the weather, like Dominic's opinion mattered less than Seafoam. He has strong beliefs about clan purity, I said carefully, using the words I'd heard Dominic use in his speeches. He has strong beliefs about his own importance, Morgan interjected from across the fire. She was cooking something, fish I thought, the smell making my stomach clench with hunger I'd been ignoring. Purity is just the excuse, control is the goal. Theron had been silent through this exchange, standing slightly apart from the fire's glow, his face half in shadow. But now he spoke, his voice carrying weight that made even the flames seem to bend toward him. You're human. Not a question. Yes, I met his eyes across the fire, refusing to look away even though instinct screamed at me to lower my gaze before an ocean lord. Completely human. No connection to the water at all. My parents were human too. And Tidecaller took you in, after my parents drowned, the old matriarch, Serena, she believed in, I struggled for the word, compassion I guess. She said family wasn't just about blood or the ability to transform. But Dominic doesn't share that belief. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No. He gave me 2 days to leave, called it mercy because he could have just, I trailed off, not wanting to finish that sentence. Killed you, Theron finished for me, his voice flat. Yes, he could have. The silence that followed was heavy with truths nobody wanted to speak. Finn focused intently on the fish. Tobias fed the fire with precise, careful movements. Iris finished wrapping my hands and sat back, her job complete. I should have been afraid. I was surrounded by predators who could drown me in seconds, who could hold me underwater until my lungs burst. Led by a lord whose reputation made seasoned clan leaders nervous. But I wasn't afraid. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. It was absurd, illogical, probably stupid. But there it was anyway, a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the fire. Why are you helping me? The question returned, more urgent now that I knew who he was. You're the Ocean Lord. You don't have time to build cabins for random humans on beaches. Theron was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved into the firelight fully, and I could see his face clearly. Strong features marked by old scars, eyes that had seen too much, a mouth set in lines that suggested he smiled rarely and meant it even less. I had a brother once, he said finally, and the words fell like stones into still water. Human, fully human like you. The clan, my father's clan, barely tolerated him. He was bright, hopeful, thought he could earn their acceptance through hard work and dedication. The past tense landed like a blow. Had a brother. I knew what that meant. He died trying to prove himself, Theron continued, his voice carefully empty of emotion. Went out in a storm he had no business being in, trying to rescue a fishing boat that was caught in riptide. Wanted to show he could be useful even without being able to transform. I found him 2 days later, washed up on the rocks. The silence that followed could have swallowed worlds. Finn had stopped cooking. Iris stared at her hands. Tobias and Morgan's eyes reflected firelight and old grief. I'm sorry, I whispered, the words inadequate and small. I don't want your pity. His eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that stole my breath. I want you to understand that when I saw you building with dead driftwood, refusing to quit even when any sane person would have, I saw him. Saw what he might have been if someone had helped instead of judged. My throat closed around words I couldn't speak. This wasn't charity. This was atonement, a debt paid to a ghost by helping a stranger who reminded him of loss. The cabin will be finished tomorrow, he said, his tone shifting back to something more neutral, more lordly. We'll leave you with supplies, enough to last through winter if you're careful. Tomorrow. They'd be gone tomorrow. This strange, impossible kindness would end, and I'd be alone again in a cabin built by Selkies who'd had no reason to care. Thank you, I managed, the words breaking slightly. I can never repay, I don't want repayment. He cut me off, firm but not unkind. I want you to survive. That's enough. Morgan declared the fish ready, and we ate in relative silence, the meat rich and smoky and the best thing I'd tasted in weeks. They produced bread from somewhere, and dried fruit, and I didn't ask questions because my stomach was too busy celebrating. For the first time since leaving Tide Collar, I went to sleep with a full belly and something like hope curling warm beneath my ribs. I woke to the sound of hammering and the smell of fresh-cut wood. For a disorienting moment, I thought I was back at Tide Collar, that the last weeks had been a nightmare and I'd wake to find Serena still alive, still leading with gentle strength. Then reality settled back into my bones. The hard sand beneath me, the half-finished cabin above, the impossible kindness of strangers who'd had no reason to stop. Dawn light filtered through gaps in the roof that Morgan and Tobias were already working to close. I'd slept by the fire, wrapped in a blanket I didn't remember being given, my body warm for the first time in what felt like forever. Theron was nowhere visible, but I could hear his voice outside, low and commanding, speaking to someone I couldn't see. I stood, my muscles protesting after yesterday's work and weeks of sleeping on cold ground. My hands were stiff under Iris's careful bandaging, but the pain had dulled to something manageable. Small mercies. I folded the blanket, thick wool that probably cost more than I'd earned in a year at Tide Collar, and stepped outside into air so cold it burned my lungs. The cabin looked different in daylight. Real. Solid. The walls stood straight and true, the roof nearly complete, window frames already in place waiting for actual windows. I stared at those frames, at the level of detail and care that had gone into something meant for me, and nobody human who'd been building with garbage just yesterday. "You're awake," Finn appeared from around the side of the cabin, carrying an armful of what looked like dried sea grass. "Good. I need someone with small hands." Before I could ask what for, he thrust the sea grass at me and gestured toward the walls. "Chinking goes between the logs to keep the wind out. You pack it tight, understand? Every gap, no matter how small." I understood. This was work I could do, work that didn't require supernatural strength or ocean magic. I took the sea grass and got started, wedging it carefully into the spaces between logs while Finn watched with a critical eye. "Tighter," he said after I'd done 3 sections. "Winter storms here don't forgive half measures." I pushed harder, ignoring the protest from my wrapped hands. He nodded approval and left me to it, disappearing back around the cabin. I worked methodically, losing myself in the repetition, the simple satisfaction of seeing gaps disappear under my careful attention. The sun climbed higher, though it never quite broke through the thick cloud cover. I heard voices, Theron's deep rumble, another voice I didn't recognize, sharper and more formal. Curiosity pulled at me, but I kept working. Whatever business the Ocean Lord had, it wasn't mine to know. I was halfway through the east wall when Theron came around the corner, followed by a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, austere, with silver-threaded dark hair pulled back in a severe knot. His eyes were gray like storm clouds, and when they landed on me, I felt assessed and catalogued in the space of a heartbeat. "This is her?" the man asked, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made you stand straighter without thinking. "This is Elena," Theron confirmed. "Elena, this is Nathaniel. He's my second." A second. The right hand of an ocean lord, the enforcer of law and will across an entire territory. I should have bowed, should have shown proper respect, but my hands were full of sea grass and I was frozen between politeness and practicality. Nathaniel saved me the decision by stepping closer, his sharp gaze taking in my bandaged hands, my too-thin frame under borrowed clothes, the careful way I'd been packing the chinking. "You're human." "Yes, sir." The honorific slipped out automatically, years of conditioning. "And Dominic Thorne exiled you from Tide Collar." My stomach dropped. How much did they know? How much had Theron told him? "Yes, sir." He looked at Theron, something passing between them in that wordless way clan members communicated. Then back to me. "Did he give a reason?" "I'm human," I repeated what should have been obvious. "He wants a pure clan, warriors who can transform." I'm neither of those things. You survived 3 weeks alone on a coastline that kills trained selkies. Nathaniel's tone was flat, factual. That suggests you're more capable than Dominic gave you credit for. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. He circled me slowly, not threatening but thorough, like he was solving a puzzle. When he completed the circle, he addressed Theron without looking at him. She can't stay here alone. I know, Theron's voice carried something heavy, something resigned. The winter will kill her, or rogues will find her, or Nathaniel's sharp eyes found mine again. Dominic will hear she's still alive and send someone to finish what Exile started. Ice flooded my veins. I hadn't thought about that, about the possibility that Dominic might consider my continued existence an insult to his authority. Clan leaders had killed for less, and Dominic had always been more concerned with perception than mercy. She could come with us, Iris suggested from where she'd appeared on the roof. How long had she been listening? We have space. We have space, Nathaniel agreed carefully. The question is whether bringing a human into the palace is wise given current tensions. What tensions? I asked, then immediately regretted speaking. This wasn't my conversation, wasn't my business. But Theron answered anyway, his ice blue eyes finding mine with an intensity that made everything else fade slightly. There's been resistance to some of my policies, older clan leaders who believe in traditional hierarchies, who think humans are beneath notice or worse. Bringing you into the heart of my territory would be making a statement. A dangerous statement, Nathaniel added, for both of you. Then I won't go, the words came out stronger than I felt. I'll manage here. You'll die, Theron interrupted flatly. You'll die. Maybe not today, maybe not next week, but winter doesn't care about determination. The truth of it sat between us like a third presence. He was right. I'd been running on borrowed time since I left Tidecaller, on luck and desperation and the kind of stubborn refusal to quit that my mother used to both praise and worry over. But luck ran out. It always did. If she comes, Tobias spoke up, his quiet voice somehow carrying weight despite its softness, she becomes our responsibility, the clan's responsibility. Are we prepared for that? It was the right question, the one that cut through sentiment to practicality. I was a liability, a weakness they'd be choosing to take on. In clan dynamics, that made no sense. You didn't willingly accept burdens that couldn't pull their own weight. I can work, I said quickly, desperately. I know I'm not strong like you, but I can cook, clean, mend things, I can. Elena, Theron's voice cut through my spiraling. Stop. I stopped, my mouth clicking shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. If you come with us, it won't be as a servant. I have staff for cooking and cleaning. You'll come as part of the clan, with all the protections and expectations that entails. Clan. The word hung in the air like something magical, something I'd wanted my entire time at Tidecaller but had never truly been offered. They'd taken me in but never made me clan, never given me the belonging that went soul deep. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would you? Because I choose to. Simple, final, the way an ocean lord spoke when his decision was made and argument was pointless. The question is whether you choose to accept. I looked at the cabin they'd built, this impossible gift that represented more kindness than I'd known in years. Then at the ocean beyond, the wilderness that would eventually claim me no matter how hard I fought. Then at Theron, at Nathaniel, at Iris still perched on the roof, and Finn and Morgan and Tobias watching from the doorway. They were offering me something I'd stopped believing existed, a chance. Not charity, not pity, but actual belonging with people who'd proven through action that they saw value in me beyond what I could produce or provide. Yes, the word barely made it past my throat. Yes, I accept. Nathaniel nodded once, crisp and businesslike. Then we leave in 3 hours. Finn, Morgan, finish the cabin anyway. We'll use it as a way station for patrols. He looked at me. Pack light. We travel fast. He left then, moving with the kind of purposeful grace that came from decades of authority. I stared after him, my mind trying to catch up with how quickly my life had just changed direction. "He's protective," Theron said quietly, reading something in my expression, "and suspicious of anything that might threaten clan stability. But he's fair. Give him time." Time. I'd have time now, something I hadn't been sure I'd have even a day ago. The reality of it was starting to sink in, bringing with it 1,000 questions I didn't know how to ask. Theron seemed to sense my overwhelm. "Go inside. Eat something. Iris will find you clothes more suitable for travel." He paused, then added more softly, "It's going to be all right, Elena." I wanted to believe him. Maybe I even did, a little. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of activity. Iris did indeed produce clothes, thick waterproof pants that actually fit, a proper winter jacket that didn't have holes, boots that weren't held together by hope and stubbornness. Everything was clearly expensive, clearly meant for someone important, and I felt like an imposter wearing them. "They suit you better than me anyway," Iris said when I tried to protest. "I prefer brighter colors." Morgan pressed food into my hands, dried fish, hard cheese, bread that was still somehow warm. "Eat now, eat on the journey. You're too thin." It makes Theron twitchy. I ate because arguing seemed pointless, because my stomach had stopped believing food was reliable. Between bites, I watched them finish the cabin with the same meticulous care they'd shown from the start, every detail perfect, every joint sound. A gift completed even though I wouldn't be staying. When it was time to leave, I stood in front of the cabin and felt the strangest sense of loss. I'd never lived here, never spent more than a night under its complete roof, but it represented something important. Proof that I'd tried to survive, that I'd mattered enough for someone to help. "Ready?" Theron appeared beside me, dressed now in clothes that marked him clearly as royalty, dark leather and fur-lined cloak, boots that probably cost more than the cabin's worth of timber. "No," I admitted, "but I don't think I'll ever be ready for this." His mouth quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Honest?" "Good. We traveled as seals, all except me." I rode on Theron's back, my fingers twisted in his sleek fur, trying not to think about how absurd this was, a human riding the ocean lord like some kind of fairy tale. But he'd insisted, and Nathaniel had agreed it was the fastest way to cover distance. The world blurred past in shades of blue and gray and white foam. They moved with impossible speed, diving through waves I could barely process, navigating the coastal waters like they'd been born to them. Which I supposed they had been. I held on and tried not to be sick, tried not to think about what I was leaving behind or racing toward. We stopped once at a sheltered cove where Nathaniel deemed it safe to rest. I slid off Theron's back on shaking legs, my muscles screaming from hours of tension. He shifted back to human form, apparently unconcerned with the cold or his lack of shirt. "You're doing well," he said, and it sounded like he meant it. "I'm terrified," I admitted, accepting water from a canteen Tobias offered. "Terror and bravery aren't opposites." He watched me with those unsettling ice-blue eyes. "Bravery is being terrified and moving forward anyway." My mother's words from his mouth in the middle of a frozen cove. The coincidence made my chest tight. "We'll reach the palace by nightfall," Nathaniel announced, "all business. Elena, when we arrive, stay close to Theron. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact with anyone who challenges you. Understand?" I understood. I was walking into a den of predators who might see me as prey, protected only by the word of a lord whose authority some apparently questioned. What could possibly go wrong? We traveled on as the sun began its descent, painting the water golden pink. I watched the light change, memorizing these moments of strange, fragile peace. Somehow I knew that once we reached the palace, everything would change again. And as Theron's muscles bunched beneath me for another dive, I held tighter and whispered a prayer to the mother I'd lost, hoping she could see me from wherever the dead went. "I'm still trying, Mama. Still being brave even when I'm terrified." The coastline began to change, and in the distance, I saw structures. The palace wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined something underwater maybe, or carved into cliff faces, the kind of fortress you saw in movies about sea creatures and ancient magic. Instead, as we rounded the final headland, I saw a compound that looked almost normal. Buildings with actual architecture rising from terraced cliffs, streets paved with white stone, shops with glass windows displaying goods. It looked like any coastal town in California or Oregon, the kind of place tourists might visit for the scenery, except everyone in it could turn into a seal and hold their breath for an hour. We shifted back to human forms at the edge of the compound, Theron and his clan dressing quickly in clothes they'd carried in waterproof packs. I stood awkwardly to the side, very aware that I was the only one who found public nudity uncomfortable. They treated it like changing shirts, casual and unremarkable. "Stay close," Nathaniel reminded me, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. We walked into the compound as the lights began to engage, casting everything in warm golden glow that should have felt welcoming. But I could feel the stares, could see people stopping mid-conversation to watch us pass. Watching me pass. A human in their midst, walking beside their lord like I had a right to be there. The whisper started immediately. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the expressions. Confusion, curiosity, hostility. A woman with gray-streaked hair actually stepped back, pulling her child closer as we walked by. The child stared at me with wide brown eyes, and I looked away, feeling like something dangerous even though I was the only one here who couldn't hurt anyone. "Ignore them," Theron said quietly, his hand finding the small of my back. The touch was light, barely there, but it sent a clear message to everyone watching. She's under my protection. It also sent my heart rate into territory that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the warmth of his palm through my borrowed jacket. We climbed terraced paths toward the center of the compound where a building rose larger than the others. Not quite a palace, but definitely more than a house. Stone and glass construction, multiple stories, windows that glowed with interior light. Home, apparently, for the Ocean Lord and his inner circle. The entrance hall was warm, heated by radiant floors that felt like magic under my frozen feet. The floor was polished stone, walls decorated with tapestries depicting seals in various poses, swimming, hunting, basking on rocks. A grand staircase curved upward to floors I couldn't see. Elena. A woman appeared from a side door, older than Nathaniel, with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair pulled back in a practical braid. "I'm Catherine. I run the household." "You must be freezing and starving, poor dear." Before I could respond, she'd wrapped an arm around my shoulders and was steering me away from the others, chattering about hot baths and warm food and proper rest. I looked back at Theron, uncertain, and found him watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Go," he said. "Catherine will take care of you." Catherine did exactly that. She led me up 2 flights of stairs, down a hallway lined with doors, and into a room that made me stop breathing. It was larger than any space I'd ever called my own, with a real bed covered in quilts, a window overlooking the ocean below, a sitting area with comfortable chairs. A door to one side revealed a bathroom with an actual soaking tub, deep and ceramic and perfect. "This is too much," I managed. "I can't, nonsense." Catherine was already turning taps, steam rising as hot water gushed into the tub. His lordship was very clear. "You're to be treated as clan, which means you get a proper room like everyone else." She added something to the water that smelled like eucalyptus and sea salt. "Now you soak while I bring up food. No arguments." She left before I could form any, closing the door with a firm click. I stared at the rising water, at the luxury of it, and felt tears prick hot behind my eyes. I'd spent 3 weeks washing in freezing ocean water when I could manage it, going days without sometimes because the cold was too brutal. And now this. Hot water, privacy, safety. I undressed slowly, peeling away layers of borrowed clothes and my own underneath, threadbare and stained from weeks of survival. My body was a map of recent history. Bruises from falls, scratches from rocks, the sharp outline of ribs that hadn't been so visible before. I looked like what I was, someone who'd been barely surviving. The water was hot enough to hurt at first, but I sank into it anyway, letting it burn away the cold that had settled into my bones. I scrubbed with soap that smelled like mint and ocean air, watching dirt and dried blood swirl away down the drain when I finally pulled the plug. Then I filled it again just to soak, just to feel warm all the way through. Catherine returned with food, soup thick with seafood and vegetables, bread still warm from the oven, cheese and fruit and more than I could possibly eat. She also brought clothes, simple but well-made, in sizes that would actually fit me. Eat, rest, she ordered gently. Tomorrow will be soon enough for everything else. But sleep, when I finally crawled into the bed after eating until my stomach ached pleasantly, didn't come easily. The mattress was too soft, the room too quiet, the safety too unfamiliar. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to sounds of the compound settling around me, and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. Wondered what Theron had gotten himself into by bringing me here. Morning came with pale sunlight and a knock on my door. I opened it to find Iris holding a tray with breakfast, eggs, smoked fish, toast, tea that smelled like heaven. "His lordship requests your presence in his study after you eat," she said, formal in a way she hadn't been on the beach. "I'll wait to escort you." The formality felt like a warning. Out there, we'd been something close to equals, united in the simple goal of survival. Here, in the seat of his power, the hierarchy was reasserting itself. He was the ocean lord. I was, what exactly? I ate quickly, dressed in the clothes Catherine had provided, dark pants, a soft sweater in deep teal, boots that fit perfectly. When I emerged, Iris led me through hallways I'd never navigate alone, past rooms where I glimpsed other clan members who stopped to stare. None of them smiled. The study was on the third floor, a room lined with books and maps dominated by a massive desk carved from driftwood. Theron stood by the window, looking out over his territory, and didn't turn when we entered. "Thank you, Iris," he said, dismissing her without looking. The door closed, and we were alone. The silence stretched long enough to make me anxious, my hands twisting together in front of me. Finally, he turned, and I saw something in his face that hadn't been there yesterday. Strain maybe, or worry. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Well, a lie, but a polite one. The room is beautiful." "Thank you." He waved that away like it didn't matter. "Elena, we need to discuss your position here." My stomach dropped. Here it came. The conditions, the expectations, the price for his kindness. "You're human in a Selkie clan," he continued, moving to lean against his desk. "That makes you vulnerable in ways you might not fully understand. There are those who will see you as weak, as prey, as something to be eliminated to prove a point to me. I understand. I did, too. I'd lived this reality at Tide Collar, just with less deadly stakes. I don't think you do." His eyes found mine, serious and intense. "At Tide Collar, you were tolerated. Here, you're a statement. By bringing you into my home, into my clan, I'm declaring that humans have value beyond what traditional clan law acknowledges, that protection extends to all, not just those born with the ability to transform." That's good, isn't it?" I asked carefully. "It's necessary," he corrected. "But it makes you a target for those who oppose change, which is why I'm assigning you a guard." "A guard?" I echoed, not sure I'd heard right. "Finn will accompany you whenever you leave this building. He's strong, loyal, and won't tolerate anyone threatening you." Theron's expression softened slightly. "I know it seems excessive, but please trust me on this." I nodded, not trusting my voice. A guard because I needed protection from his own people. The reality of my situation was becoming clearer by the moment. "There's something else." He hesitated, and I'd never seen him uncertain before. It was almost worse than his command. "The clan will expect, they'll wonder about your role here, about why I brought you specifically." "What do you mean?" "They'll assume you're," he paused, choosing words carefully, "important to me. Personally." Heat flooded my face as understanding crashed through me. "They'd think I was his, what? Lover? Mate?" Some kind of romantic interest? But I'm not, I said quickly. We barely know each other. You helped me because of your brother, because… I know that, you know that. But perception matters in clan politics. He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustrated. I won't correct their assumptions because the protection that comes with being seen as mine is the strongest shield I can give you. But I wanted you to understand what you're walking into. The whispers, the judgment, the jealousy. I thought about the stairs last night, the woman pulling her child away, the hostility I'd felt like a physical presence. If they thought I was sleeping with their lord, that hostility would intensify into something far more dangerous. Maybe I shouldn't stay, I said quietly. If my being here causes problems? No. The word came out sharp, commanding. You're not leaving. I won't send you back to die on that beach because my clan has outdated ideas about who deserves protection. But, no, Elena. He stepped closer, and I could smell salt water and something wild, something that was purely him. I made you a promise. Your clan now. That means something to me, even if it doesn't to everyone else yet. The conviction in his voice made my throat tight. Nobody had ever fought for me like this, had ever considered me worth the political cost. Okay, I whispered. I'll stay. Something in his expression eased, tension I hadn't noticed releasing from his shoulders. Good. Now, Catherine will show you the compound, introduce you to the staff. Finn will find you after lunch for a tour of the town. Tonight, there's a clan dinner. It's informal but well attended. You'll meet more of the inner circle. A clan dinner where I'd be on display, judged by Selkies who already resented my presence. Perfect. I'll manage, I said with more confidence than I felt. His mouth quirked in that ghost of a smile. I know you will. You survived 3 weeks alone on winter coastline. A dinner party should be easy by comparison. Somehow, I doubted that. The day passed in a blur of names and faces I'd never remember. Catherine introduced me to the household staff, mostly older Selkies who treated me with polite distance. The compound was enormous, far larger than it had seemed from outside, with wings I didn't even explore. Finn appeared after lunch as promised, cheerful and relaxed in a way that helped ease my nerves. Don't let them intimidate you, he said as we walked through the town. Most of them are more curious than hostile. They've just never seen Theron bring anyone home before. Never? That seemed impossible. Never, Finn confirmed. He's been Ocean Lord for 9 years. In that time, he's been absolutely focused on rebuilding clan relations, strengthening alliances, modernizing laws. Romance hasn't even been on his radar. I'm not romance, I protested. I know that, you know that. But, he grinned, perception is a funny thing. We walked past shops where people definitely stared, past a school where children played in a courtyard, past what looked like a training ground where Selkies sparred in both human and animal forms. Finn pointed out important buildings, introduced me to a few people who ranged from genuinely welcoming to coldly polite. By the time we returned to the compound, my head was spinning with information and my nerves were frayed raw thinking about the dinner ahead. Catherine helped me dress, a simple dress in midnight blue that was far nicer than anything I'd ever owned. She tried to do something with my hair, which had grown wild and uneven during my time alone, but eventually gave up and just pulled it back in a simple braid. You look lovely, she assured me. Just be yourself. His lordship clearly sees something special in you. The dining hall was already full when I arrived, Finn at my side as promised. Long tables filled with Selkies in various stages of conversation, the air thick with the smell of food and the hum of clan dynamics I didn't fully understand. Conversation didn't stop exactly when I entered, but it shifted, became more conscious, more aware. Theron stood at the head of the main table, Nathaniel to his right. When he saw me, something in his expression changed, warmed maybe, or softened. He gestured to the empty seat to his left. The seat of honor. Of course. I walked the length of the hall, feeling every eye track my movement, feeling the weight of judgment and curiosity and resentment. But I kept my head up, kept my pace steady, and when I reached the table, I met Theron's eyes and saw approval there. "Everyone," he said, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "This is Elena. She's clan now, under my personal protection. I expect you all to treat her accordingly." It wasn't a request. It was a command from an ocean lord. And as I sat beside him, feeling the heat of his presence and the cold assessment of his clan, I realized that my real test was just beginning. The dinner was a battlefield disguised as a meal. Conversation flowed around me like water around a stone, clan members talking over me, past me, occasionally at me with questions that felt more like tests. A young woman with copper hair asked sweetly how I was adjusting to living among Selkies, the emphasis on the last word making it clear she found the concept absurd. An older man wanted to know what skills I possessed that might be useful to the clan, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer was nothing. I answered as best I could, keeping my voice steady, my responses honest but not defensive. Theron ate beside me, seemingly focused on his food, but I could feel his attention tracking every interaction. Every subtle dig masked as polite inquiry. It was Nathaniel who finally cut through the tension. "Enough," he said, his voice not loud but absolutely commanding. "Elena survived 3 weeks on winter coastline that would have killed half of you." He looked around the table, daring anyone to argue. "That deserves respect, not interrogation." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then Finn laughed, breaking the tension. "She also packs chinking better than Morgan, which is really saying something." "I resent that," Morgan said mildly, but she was smiling. "My chinking is excellent." "Your chinking is adequate at best," Tobias added, speaking up for the first time all evening. The conversation shifted then, away from me and onto clan business, recent patrols, supply issues for the winter. I ate gratefully, letting the words wash over me, just relieved to no longer be the center of attention. Under the table, I felt something warm press against my hand. I looked down to find Theron's fingers had found mine, a brief squeeze of reassurance before he withdrew. The touch lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it steadied something in me that had been shaking since we arrived. After dinner, people lingered in smaller groups, conversations flowing into the adjacent common room where a fire roared and comfortable furniture invited relaxation. I stood awkwardly near the wall, not sure where I fit in this social ecosystem, when a voice spoke from behind me. "You handled that well." I turned to find an elderly woman, her hair completely silver, her eyes a pale blue that seemed to see straight through me. She moved with a cane, but there was strength in her bearing that had nothing to do with physical power. "I'm not sure I handled it at all," I admitted. "You didn't run, you didn't hide, you didn't apologize for existing." She smiled, and it transformed her face into something warm and knowing. "I'm Adelaide. I was Theron's grandmother's closest friend. I've known that boy since he was born. It's nice to meet you." I meant it. She felt safe somehow, like Catherine, like someone who'd seen enough of life not to waste time on pettiness. "Walk with me," she said, and it wasn't quite a command but definitely wasn't a suggestion. We moved slowly through the compound, her cane tapping against stone floors until we reached a quieter wing where the sounds of the gathering faded to distant murmurs. She led me to a small sitting room, gesturing for me to sit in a chair by the window. "Do you know what happened to Theron's brother?" she asked without preamble. "He said he died trying to prove himself in a storm." Adelaide nodded slowly. "Matthias. He was bright, brave, and absolutely determined to earn the clan's respect. But the clan, Theron's father's clan, never gave him a real chance. They tolerated his existence but made it clear every day that he was less than, weak, useless." Her eyes found mine. "He died trying to rescue a fishing boat alone because he thought if he could save them, they'd finally see him as valuable." My chest ached with recognition, with the familiar weight of trying to prove worth to people who'd already decided you had none. "Theron found him 3 days later," Adelaide continued, her voice soft with old grief. "He was 18. It changed him. He'd always been serious, but after Matthias, he became driven, focused on changing clan law, on creating space for those who didn't fit traditional molds. When his father died and he became Ocean Lord, he started implementing those changes. And he's made enemies because of it. Why are you telling me this? I asked quietly. Because you need to understand what you represent to him. You're not just some human he decided to help on a whim. You're his brother's ghost given a second chance. You're proof that his vision for the clan, for all clans, can work. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. That's a heavy burden for one person to carry. Are you prepared for it? I thought about the cabin built from driftwood, about walking away from the only home I'd known rather than accept being less than, about choosing to survive even when giving up would have been easier. I don't want to be a symbol, I said honestly. I just want to live, to maybe find something like belonging. Adelaide smiled, sad and understanding. Those things aren't mutually exclusive, but they're not simple either. She stood, using her cane for leverage. Be careful, child. There are those who would hurt Theron by hurting you. Stay close to those who've proven themselves trustworthy. She left me there, her words echoing in the quiet room. I sat for a long time, watching moonlight dance on the ocean outside the window, thinking about responsibility and belonging and the price of both. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Mornings with Catherine, learning the household rhythms. Afternoons with Finn, who appointed himself not just my guard but my guide to clan culture. Evenings often in Theron's study, where he'd work through endless documents while I read from his extensive library, both of us comfortable in shared silence. The clan remained divided in their opinion of me. Some, like Iris and Tobias, treated me with casual acceptance. Others maintained polite distance. A few made their hostility clear through small cruelties, doors closing in my face, conversations stopping when I approached, invitations to clan events that somehow never reached me. I learned to navigate it, to find my place in the spaces between acceptance and rejection. I helped Catherine in the kitchens because it gave me purpose and her cheerful company. I volunteered at the clan school, reading to the younger children who didn't yet understand why a human among them was supposed to be wrong. I made myself useful in quiet ways, not to prove my worth but because usefulness felt like armor against the judgment. And I watched Theron lead his clan with a combination of strength and compassion that made my chest ache in ways I didn't want to examine too closely. It was 8 weeks after my arrival when everything shifted. A messenger arrived from Tidecaller, a young Selkie who looked nervous delivering his leader's message. Theron received him in the formal hall with Nathaniel and other senior clan members present. I watched from the balcony above, where Finn had positioned us after hearing who'd arrived. Dominic Thorne sends greetings to the Ocean Lord, the messenger began, formal and rehearsed, and requests the return of property that fled Tidecaller territory without permission. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Theron's expression didn't change, but I'd learned to read the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes went flat and cold. Property, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. The human girl, Elena, the messenger swallowed hard. Leader Dominic claims she stole from the clan before fleeing and should be returned to face justice. I stopped breathing. Stole? I'd taken nothing but the clothes on my back and what little food I could carry. This was a lie, a fabrication to justify dragging me back to Tidecaller, making an example of me. Dominic Thorne is mistaken, Theron said, each word precise and cold as ice. Elena is a member of my clan under my protection. She will not be returned to face false charges designed to punish her for the crime of surviving his cruelty. Leader Dominic was very clear, I don't care what Dominic was. Theron's voice didn't rise, but power rolled through it like thunder. You will return to Tidecaller and inform your leader that if he wishes to discuss clan law regarding refugees and asylum, he may request a formal audience. Until then, this matter is closed. The messenger left quickly, practically fleeing. The hall erupted in murmured conversations, clan members debating the implications of their lord's declaration. I stood frozen on the balcony, my hands gripping the railing so hard my knuckles were white. Come, Finn said quietly, guiding me away before anyone below could look up and see me. He took me to Theron's study and left me there, closing the door softly behind him. I paced the room, anxiety crawling under my skin like fire ants. Dominic had made me his problem, had turned my existence into a political issue between territories. Theron had just publicly chosen me over diplomatic peace with a neighboring leader. The door opened 20 minutes later. Theron entered, closed it behind him, and just looked at me. "I'm sorry," I said immediately. "I didn't steal anything, I swear, I know." He crossed to the cabinet where he kept whiskey, poured 2 glasses, and handed me one. "Dominic is creating a pretext. He wants you back to save face, to prove that no one leaves his territory without permission." I took the glass but didn't drink. "What happens now?" "Now we wait to see if he escalates or backs down." Theron downed his whiskey in one swallow. "Either way, you're not going anywhere. This could start a conflict between clans." "Because of me?" "No." He set his glass down hard enough that it cracked. "Because of Dominic and his outdated ideas about power and control, because of selkies like him who see humans as less than, as property to be managed. This was always coming, Elena. You're just the catalyst." I finally drank, the whiskey burning down my throat. "I never wanted to be anyone's catalyst." "I know." His voice softened. "But sometimes we don't get to choose our roles." The tension between us had been building for weeks, in the shared silences, the brief touches, the way his eyes followed me across rooms. I'd been trying to ignore it, to tell myself that gratitude wasn't attraction, that what I felt was just the normal response to kindness after years of cruelty. But standing there with the weight of political consequences hanging between us, I couldn't pretend anymore. "Why?" I asked. "Why risk so much for me specifically? You could help humans without making me your personal project, without bringing me into your home and your life," and my voice broke. "Why me, Theron?" He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, because when I saw you building that shelter with driftwood, refusing to quit even when any rational person would have, I saw someone who deserved better than what the world had given them, someone who deserved a chance to be more than just a survivor." He stepped closer, his ice blue eyes intense. "And maybe because somewhere in helping you, I thought I could forgive myself for not being there when Matthias needed me." The honesty of it cracked something open in my chest. "You can't save everyone." "No, but I could save you." His hand lifted, hesitating before gently touching my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. And maybe selfishly, I wanted to. I should have stepped back, should have maintained the distance between ocean lord and human refugee. But instead, I leaned into his touch, into the warmth of his palm against my skin. "I'm not him," I whispered. "I'm not your brother." "I know." His forehead rested against mine, our breath mingling in the space between. "You're Elena, stubborn, brave, impossibly kind despite every reason not to be. You're yourself, and that's exactly who I." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The truth was written in the way he held me, gentle despite his strength, reverent despite his power. When he kissed me, it was soft and careful, asking rather than taking. I answered by rising on my toes, by threading my fingers through his dark hair, by choosing this impossible thing with the same determination I'd shown building a shelter from driftwood. The kiss deepened, became something more urgent, more real. His hands found my waist, pulled me closer, and I went willingly, pressing against the solid warmth of him. We broke apart gasping, and his eyes were molten ice blue, searching my face. "Stay," he said, and I knew he meant more than just tonight, more than just this moment. "Stay and help me build something better, a clan where humans and selkies can exist together as equals, where no one has to prove their worth just to survive." "I'm already staying," I reminded him, smiling through tears I hadn't realized were falling. "Where else would I go?" "Anywhere you wanted." His thumb caught one of my tears. "You're free, Elena. You could leave tomorrow and I'd help you start somewhere new, somewhere safe. I need you to know that it's a choice, not an obligation." I thought about the cabin on the beach, about the pile of driftwood that had become something solid under the hands of selkies who'd chosen to help, About how belonging wasn't something you earned but something freely given by people who saw value in you beyond what you could produce. I choose this, I said firmly. I choose you, this clan, this impossible life you're building. Not because I owe you, but because I want to. The smile that transformed his face was like sunrise, warm and bright and full of promise. He kissed me again, and this time it felt like a beginning rather than just a moment. Dominic sent 2 more messengers over the following weeks, each with increasingly aggressive demands. Theron refused them all, his position unchanging. Eventually, word came that other clan leaders were watching this conflict, that some supported Theron's stance on human rights while others sided with Dominic's traditional views. The situation remained tense, unresolved, hanging over us like a coming storm. But within that tension, life continued. I found my place in the clan slowly, through small moments of connection, teaching a young Selkie to read, helping Catherine prepare for the winter solstice celebration, training with Finn in basic self-defense because he insisted I should at least know how to throw a punch. And I built something with Theron that grew from shared respect into something deeper. He taught me about clan law and history. I taught him that strength wasn't always about power, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was choose compassion over cruelty. 8 months after that first night on the beach, on the anniversary of the day he'd found me building with driftwood, Theron made a formal declaration before the assembled clan. He declared me his mate, not in the supernatural sense Selkies understood, but in the human tradition of partnership and choice. And he announced new clan laws protecting humans, granting them full status and rights within Pacific territory. Some cheered. Some remained silent. A few walked out in protest. But the message was clear. The clan was changing, growing into something that made space for those who didn't fit traditional molds. That night, standing on the balcony overlooking the ocean that had become home, Theron wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. I thought about the girl I'd been, building a hopeless shelter from broken pieces, certain she'd die alone in the cold. Thought about everything that had led me here, the loss, the rejection, the desperate fight to survive. And I thought about what I'd found instead. Belonging, purpose, love that didn't demand I be anything other than myself. "Not a single one," I said, turning in his arms to kiss him as the first winter storm rolled in, covering the world in mist. Outside, seals called to each other in greeting to the changing season. And inside, wrapped in warmth and safety and the kind of love that chose you rather than claimed you, I finally understood what it meant to come home. Not to a place, but to a person who saw you, truly saw you, and decided you were worth fighting for. The driftwood had become something solid after all, not through my efforts alone, but through the hands of those who'd chosen to help, who'd seen potential in what others called worthless. And in the end, that made all the difference.